What's going on, guys? Nathan here, back again with another goldfishing video. This time we're going to be goldfishing Animar Soul of Elements, one of my favorite teamer commanders that aims to reduce the casting costs of our creature spells and power out a lethal board state extremely quickly. This particular build is a non-combo Cascade subtheme build, so lots of multi-spelling, lots of free creature spells. Cards like Bloodbraid Challenger are what we want to be casting after we play Animar, cards like Bloodbraid Elf, etc. in order to rack up that discount as fast as we can. I actually did make a full deck tech for this deck, and I'll have that linked down in the description below. You can check that out for all the individual card discussion and get more specifics on the game plan and things like tutor guides, etc. Now, there have been a couple of changes to the deck since I last recorded that deck tech. Somberwald Sage is a 3-mana dork that taps for 3 mana, has been replaced by Springbloom Druid, which will net us 1 land out of our deck and helps us to color fix just a little bit. The reason why is that Springbloom Druid is a little bit more better to play against board wipe heavy meta. As commander becomes more infested with keywords like ward, board wipes become more and more common, and so Springbloom Druid helps mitigate that a little bit by bringing out lands which are a little bit more untargetable by our opponents. For the same reason, Bloom Tender, which is one of the best mana dorks in the format, 2 mana 1/1 that can tap us for teamer colors if Animar is on the field, has been replaced by Farhaven Elf for the exact same reason. Again, lands just being a little bit more impervious to board wipes. And then we've also replaced a forest with a graft land in the form of a Llanowar Reborn, which has graft 1, so that can actually give Animar that 1/1 counter, and I find that it's not that bad to be playing a tapped land turn 1 or turn 2, considering that we don't have that high of a chance to play a turn 2 ramp piece. Alright, so with that out of the way, let's hop into the playtester here, and we are hoping to see at least 3 lands in our opening hand. I do see 2 here, and we don't have any ramp, so I think we would send this hand back. Our cards are just a little bit too expensive for this amount of mana in our opener. Then we will go to our second hand here, which we have 4 lands, which I think is playable. We have a Cankerbloom for some removal, Elrond for some buffing, and Atali for some card advantage once Animar comes out. Notably, we don't have a 4-drop, but I think we can play Cankerbloom after we play Animar, which I think is totally fine. All right, so let's go ahead and play a island for the turn. Actually, no, we'll play the Stomping Ground tapped, and then we also need to draw our first card for the turn, Earthshaker Giant. Then we'll go to turn 2. We will play an island, and I think we will want to sandbag the Cankerbloom for a double cast off of Animar. So let's do that. So we will go ahead and pass without playing that. Then we will play our turn 3 mountain, and then we will cast Animar for teamer colors here. Then we will go to turn 4. We will play our Misty Rainforest, and we can crack this for a dual land, and I think we will probably want to crack this for a... what is the green-blue land? I believe it's called Breeding Pool, so we will crack that for that. This will enter untapped. We will take 2 life loss off of that. Then I think what we want to do here is we have 4 mana to play with, and I think we can cast Null Drifter and then a Cankerbloom, and then that would put 2 1/1 counters onto Animar and also allow us to draw more cards. So let's cast the Null Drifter, evoking it, so that would be 3 mana. So then we would draw 2 cards, and then that will go into our graveyard. Then we will cast a Cankerbloom for only 1 mana, and now the number of counters on Animar will be 2, which I'm going to just track separately here, but I will include a counter on the video for y'all. Then we go to turn 5. Let's play a forest. Then we have 5 mana with a 2 mana discount. So we got to really think about how we want to sequence our plays with Animar here. So I think if we get up to 4, we can cast a Solemn for free. So I think what we want to be doing is maybe cast a Bloodbraid Challenger. If we cast the Bloodbraid Challenger for 3 mana, then we will get the multi-spell. We will be up to 4 1/1 counters on Animar, and we can cast the Solemn for free. So let's do that. So let's cast the Bloodbraid Challenger, and that would cost us a green, a red, and a colorless. And that will cascade, which I will fast forward for a lot of these cascades if they take too long. And a Glen Alendra Archmage pops out of Bloodbraid Challenger, which is excellent. Now, here's the deal. Animar is up to 4, and this is awesome because now we can cast a Solemn for free. Search for a mountain here. So Animar's up to 4 1/1 counters. With Solemn, he's now up to 5. And then let's see. So that mountain will enter tapped. Now we can actually hold one up for Glen Elendra, and just we can also hold up mana to crack the Canker Bloom. So what we maybe want to do is just hold up the blue, and I don't have anything that I can cast for only one colored mana here, and I don't think we have, let's see, we could potentially cast the Earthshaker Giant, but that would not really be of particular use at this point in time. Neither would Elrond of the White Council, so I think the best decision is to hold up the mana for Glen Elendra Archmage, and we will go to our next turn. Now, let's play an island. So now with a 5 mana discount, assuming that Animar is still on the field, we will be able to power out basically all of this. Terror of the Peaks. We would definitely want to play an Elrond of the White Council and an Earthshaker Giant to put a bunch of 1/1 counters onto Animar in all of our team, and then we'd also play the Earthshaker Giant for an overrun effect. So we'd be able to swing with up to, I think, let's see, so that's 5 plus 7 is 12, plus 6 is 18, plus another, I think, let's see, 5, so 9, so that would be 27 damage, plus another 3 is 32, or I'm sorry, plus another 5 is 32. So I think we would have around 30 damage that we would be able to swing with here if we were to power out Earthshaker Giant or Elrond of the White Council, assuming that Animar is on the field. For playtesting purposes, what I'm actually going to do is assume that Animar is removed. He goes back to the command zone because we don't want to be overly reliant on Animar, and I just want to see how this deck plays out with adequate removal thrown our way. So if Animar was removed, what I would probably do is just recast it, and we would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 there, and he would enter. So we'd only have 2 mana to play with here. We would also be able to hold up Glen Elendra Archmage if she hasn't been cracked already, and Canker Bloom. So I think we'd just go next. And then honestly, what we really just accomplished was to delay the closing of the game by 1 turn. But I think that's fair because Animar does not have protection from red nor from blue. So now at this point, I think how we would sequence this, what we want to be doing is playing a Tali in order to just generate as much of a discount as we can. So let's do that. 3, 4, 5, 6. We're not hurting for cards enough to play the Vizier, and here we can actually hold up another one for Glen Elendra, so I think that's totally fair, and we're going to assume that probably a Solemn, well actually no, that would be beneficial for us. Let's just assume that we had to pop the Glen Elendra here on an opponent's turn, and we'll go to turn 8, and I'm also going to assume that Bloodbraid Challenger is probably blocked, and our, let's see, yeah, I think that's a fair assumption. So let's just go to turn 8 then and see how much we can power out here. So Atali would attack. We're going to assume that we attack with Atali, and we have Eric Smithies would be off of the top. Now, technically, I believe on the stack, this would exist as a creature spell. So we'd be able to play the Eric Smithies entering as a land, and that would power up Animar to another 2/1/1 counters. And we're going to assume that we also play another random creature spell from our opponents. We're just going to assume it's 1. So I think I'll just create a token of a copy, which will just be one of whatever our vanilla opponent's creatures are. That's obviously being more beneficial, but for the purposes of playtesting, it's just going to be a vanilla 2/2. Then we would have 3 1/1 counters on Animar from that. So now we would be able to then cast a, let's see, so with 6 mana, 7 mana actually, I think we can play Terror of the Peaks for 2, and then we're really just limited by the amount of colors here. So Terror of the Peaks would enter, and then I think we would tap this way for, let's see, oh, we would only need the 2 red, so let's just tap the 2 red. Then we would be able to play Elrond and Earthshaker Giant, I believe, because Animar would be up to 4, and we have a blue and then 3 green at our disposal. So we could technically swing out here, dealing a bunch of damage with Terror of the Peaks, and maybe we would actually do Elrond first. well, it wouldn't matter if we took control of our opponent's creatures, but then we could play a Bonehorde Dracosaur next turn, and then that would exile the top two. So let's actually just assume that we would swing out with these. Animar would get another counter at 5. We would go to next turn, and that would cost us 4 mana of colored pips in total. And then we would be able to then play Pygmy Kavu to draw a few cards, Bonehorde Dracosaur or Vizier of the Menagerie. So if we did Vizier first, we would do, we wouldn't be able to cast anything with Rootbound Crag on top. However, if we played the Pygmy Kavu, for example, for only 2 green mana in total, then we would draw, let's say, like 3 cards. We could play the Ozolith, we could play Emoti, and just keep powering out creature spells here. We'd cascade this really quick. So Spring Bloom Druid would ramp us. These go on the bottom and then get shuffled. Well, technically they go on the bottom, but I'm just going to shuffle it for purposes of tapped out. And then that would allow us to sack a tapped land to search for 2 basics, which I think I would only be able to grab 1 force perhaps off of that, and then Bonehorde Dracosaur. So anyway, that's sort of how this aims to function here. We would be able to assemble lethal board state, and we have enough of an overrun to actually close out with Alpha Strikes. So we're going to assume lethal by like turn 8 or turn 9 for this particular playtest. Now let's enter back here. So we've got 4 lands, 5 lands actually. So I'm going to send this back just because 5 lands is too much, and we like to see how this performs with actual spells in our hand. And on the flip side, this only has 1 land, so let's send this hand back. We have 2 lands. Let's actually play with 2 lands and just see if we can make this function. 2 lands is not the best. We would definitely want to mulligan this, but let's just see how it works. Turn 1, we're going to draw our first card, play Ancient Ziggurat, go to turn 2. All right, excellent. We've got a forest, and do we have a turn to play? Not particularly. We could technically evoke a Foundation Breaker. However, this is a good follow-up play for Animar, so I think we'll just go to turn 3. Stormcarved Coast, we'll play that and power out Animar here on turn 3. Then we're going to go to turn 4, and I think we definitely want to play our land first. So now let's think about how we sequence this. We can play a Foundation Breaker for 2, and then let's say that we were to do that. We would want to then, if our opponents had a Soul Ring, we'd be able to cast a Thieving Skydiver where this is kicked for 1. Let's just assume that we do that there's a 1 CMC artifact on the field at the moment. So that would only cost us 2, and then Foundation Breaker would be destroyed because we would be evoking it, and then we would take control of, let's say, a Soul Ring, which I will represent with this. We'll represent with a City's Blessing because the treasure can be a little bit confusing. So let's assume this is, again, a big assumption that we can take control of a Soul Ring. Maybe for the purposes of testing, we actually don't do this now that I think about it. So let's just hold the Thieving Skydiver in our hand, and we would have Animar at 1/1 on counter. I think that's probably a more fair assumption here. So that ended up costing us 2 mana. We would go to next. All right, we didn't draw a land, unfortunately. Amphimutineer would be able to, Amphimutineer could remove something, but I think we'd probably want to play Pygmy Kavu to see if we can take control of something. Thieving Skydiver, I think is better, maybe to assume now that we can kick it, where we can take control of like a Signet or something. So let's do that. So this would cost us a total of 4 mana if we kicked it for 2. So now Animar would have 2 1/1 counters on it, and we would take control of a Signet, which I will now represent by a City's Blessing token. So now we have, and I don't think it untaps. So we're going to assume that the Signet has been used and it comes into control under our control tapped. So now we have 2 1/1 counters and 1 mana to play with, so we can cast a 3 mana spell, which we don't have in hand, unfortunately, but we've got some mana going here. So now we are going to assume that we go to turn 6 and play a Cascade Bluffs. So now here's where things get real interesting. So we've got a total of 6 mana with a 2 mana discount onto Animar. So I think we go Pygmy Kavu to try to draw more lands. We also have an Amphimutineer. Or we could be multi-spelling with a geological appraiser. We actually do have the opportunity to board wipe with a Balefire Dragon. Maybe we actually power out the Balefire Dragon first, although I think it's net mana neutral if we were to play the geological appraiser first, because if we were to tap for red for geological appraiser, we would have 2 casts onto Animar and he would go up to 4 1/1 counters. So then we would be able to cast the Pygmy Kavu and the Amphin Mutineer, and that would allow us to play the duplicate for free. So I think that's the best sequencing here. So let's go Geological Appraiser. We're going to discover 3. So Animar goes up to 3 1/1 counters. The discover trigger happens, and we will discover and probably fast forward through a lot of this, except that I already got the Imperial Recruiter off the top here, so those will go on to the bottom. Imperial Recruiter will enter. We will search for something that can give our team a giant boost or allow us to recast Animar in case he's removed. I think what we want to tutor for is perhaps a Forgotten Ancient to put more 1/1 counters, or we might just tutor for a Fierce Empath, which would give us access to a couple more options. I think I'm going to actually do that. I think I'm just going to tutor for a Fierce Empath, which will go into our hand. Now our cast is up to 4 off of the Imperial Recruiter now. So now, or I'm sorry, let's see. So we had 2, that's 3, so that's 4. Yeah, so Animar has 4 1 counters, and let's see. So now we can cast the Amphin Mutineer for 1 blue, up to 5 1/1 counters, then Pygmy Kavu to draw, let's say 2 cards. So now we're up to 6 1/1 counters. We can cast the duplicate for free, or we could possibly cast the Fierce Empath. We really have 2 mana left so maybe we would cast the Null Drifter and the Fierce Empath. So let's cast the duplicate. We're up to 6, I think, at this point in time. I'm starting to lose track, folks. Then we would cast the Fierce Empath for 1 mana. We're going to assume that this cannot tap for green. Fierce Empath. Okay, so then we would grab let's say our Apex Devastator. Sure, why not? Then we would cast our Null Drifter, and that would go into the graveyard. We would draw 2 cards. So awesome, we have a land for next turn. Let's go to turn 7, play a Reflecting Pool. And if we assume, even if we assume that Animar, let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 mana at our disposal here. Let's assume that Animar was removed somehow. If we didn't assume that Animar was removed, we could definitely clinch the game here by turn 7 by just playing an Apex Devastator, followed by a Blast Furnace Hellkite, followed by a Balefire Dragon. But let's just assume that we hit a bump in the road and then Animar was returned. Let's just say that he was returned to our hand. Let's say we got hit by a Cyclonic Rift, or maybe just a Farewell. Let's assume a Farewell, just so he goes back to the command zone. Let's see. So we have a bunch of creatures here. We're ready to overrun. We can't cast Blast Furnace Hellkite, and we can't cast Apex Devastator. We might be able to cast Blast Furnace Hellkite if we're assuming this is a 2 mana artifact, that would not be able to be cast. So I think we'd probably just recast Animar, or just play our Anduril Narsil Reforged for a total of 5 mana. We would equip it. One of our creatures would attack. We would get 2 1/1 counters on each creature we control with the City's Blessing, and then we would probably cast an Ozolith, and then if that didn't result in a knockout, we would go to next turn, play our Primeval Protector for more buffs. Our team would continue to be buffed, and then we'd be able to swing out with more 1/1 counters by turn 8. So that is the deck, everybody. And I just realized if we assume that a Farewell hit us, our board would probably be returned to the Exile Zone. But either way, I think you all sort of get an idea for how this deck functions by turn 8. Let's just do one more Goldfish here just to see how we perform. More data to inform how we build and play out the deck. All right, turn 1 here, Misty Rainforest, we're going to crack for a Ketria Triumph. That will enter tapped. We'll go to turn 2. Turn 2, we'll play a land that taps us for 2 colors of of mana here, and then we have a Canker Bloom, which we can technically run out. However, again, I like to really save these 2 mana creatures for when we play Animar, because they can really help us stay on to curve. Turn 3, we're going to cast Animar. Then we go to next turn. Then we have, let's see, we're going to play another land on turn 4. We can play our Canker Bloom for 2. Then with a 1 mana discount, we can cast our Farhaven Elf to search for a basic. Now we're at 2 1/1 counters, and I think I'm going to grab a Mountain for the double pips on Terror of the Peaks. That will enter tapped. We'll go to turn 5 with 2 1/1 counters onto Animar. I think it's best to just draw some cards off. Oh, let's see. Let's actually run out a Flooded Grove. I didn't realize I had a land in hand there. So 6 mana with a 2 mana discount. Let's just assume that Animar's removed again. Sure, why not? Let's just assume that he is destroyed by a red spell. And then now we would probably just recast Animar. Again, I'm deliberately sandbagging this deck just because this deck tends to encounter interaction for Animar. And then I think we would just simply pass the turn, essentially delaying us by 1 more turn. Play the Forest. Now with Animar with no 1/1 counters, we probably want to be continuing to draw cards so we can continue to play lands. So let's cast the Null Drifter and evoke it for 2 mana. So let's tap the red, and possibly, no, let's tap the red, the Forest, and the other, let's see, the Flooded Grove perhaps. So then Null Drifter will go to our graveyard, and we will draw 2 cards off of that. So Animar's 1/1 counter. Then we will cast a Solemn, it looks like we can, for 2 mana. I'm sorry, for 3 mana, so let's cast that for 3 mana. Solemn will net us out a basic, so let's look for an island. Sure, why not? All right, then we have 2 1/1 counters, which means we can cast a 3-drop, but we don't have one in our hand. So I think we just have to pass and hold up a Canker Bloom, and we're going to assume that we have to pop the Canker Bloom to destroy something. Then we will go to next turn here, turn 7. We're not quite ready to overrun. However, we have a big discount built up off of Animar with a ton of lands. So I think this is going to be another setup turn, and then we will finally play out our... Actually, we can play out a Maelstrom Wanderer. I think that would give us... Let's see. So if we cast 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8... We can probably cast the Terror of the Peaks into a Bloodbraid Challenger, and then next turn we'll be able to cast the Maelstrom Wanderer and the Overrun, I believe. So let's do that. So Terror of the Peaks for... Actually, let's see. We want to cast Bloodbraid Challenger first for the double spelling. So we would go red, green, and then we'll do Forest, and then I think we just need, let's see, so a total of 3 mana, because it's a 5 mana reduced by 2. So Bloodbraid Challenger, Animal will go up to 3. We're going to Cascade, and Geological Appraiser will enter, and that will then get Animar up to 4, and we will discover 3 off of Geological Appraiser. So then we will just keep multi-spelling here. We will look for a CMC spell with 3 or less off the top. Tower Winder, perfect, can get us Command Tower. We continue to want to see land in order to enable that awesome late game. So we're going to search for Command Tower. Animar's up to 5 1/1 counters. That will go to our hand. We're going to be limited by our red mana here. So we could play either Sontaran General or Terror of the Peaks. We're limited by the amount of red mana. So I think we just go Terror of the Peaks. And then let's see, does that give us right? Because we have red for Terror of the Peaks. We're up to 6 1/1 counters. And then we could play our Anduril for 2, I'm thinking. Although we might want to sandbag that, actually, just to not make our opponents aware of how much mana or what we can swing with. So I think we would probably want to sandbag that and just leave that mana up. Then we go to next turn. Then we could play a Command Tower, and then we would play a Maelstrom Wanderer, followed by an Overrun. So whatever Maelstrom Wanderer... Oh, Bane of Progress. Good thing we sandbagged that Anduril, ladies and gentlemen. and then we would have a Smirking Spelljacker, which is an unfortunate Cascade target. And I think this would probably just fizzle, but it would be a 3/3 flyer. So this would enter. We would cast the Overrun, and we would have lethal on board. So that is Animar Soul of the Elements, ladies and gentlemen. This is a deck that goes quite fast and can in the game by turn 7 or turn 8 pretty reliably. So once again, I will be creating a budget version of this deck that performs functionally the same way, just some tweaks here and there to take out the expensive lands in particular and some of the more expensive pieces like the Ozolith. So keep an eye out for that down in the description below. And with that, I'll wrap up the video. So thank you all for watching once again, and hopefully I will see you all in the next one.